I'm also announcing that as part of our additional tax cuts, we will end all taxes on overtime.
Before we start, we need to tell you up front we are not a licensed financial planning, accounting or law firm. This is simply an education program which will give you factual information. We do not give any general or specific advice around finance, business, investing, options trading or anything else. That is not what this presentation does. Please see a licensed financial planner when it comes to any investment advice you need.
What's on the show today?
Well, I'd like to go across the globe in a few ways. I'd like to start in the United States, then I'd like to flick over to Brazil, and then we end up in Australia. So
Okay.
let's have a look. Of course, there's the big breaking news that's happened. There was a second attempt, of course, on President Donald Trump's life. They have found a attempted assassination on his golf course where there was a barrel sticking out through the fence, apparently, something to that degree. We're still getting ideas on
Amazing, isn't it?
details on that. And of course, there were shots fired, but apparently it was from the Secret Service. This is the news details as they come to hand.
So they had a different crew than last time, obviously, because the last one, whenever I see them, I just think about, I can hear in my mind the Benny Hill theme. You know, it's kind of got that feel of it. It was such a joke what happened last time. So they've stepped up. They've actually taken the shots first.
It appears that way from the early reports.
Okay.
So that's going on. And what's really, really fascinating in all of this, we'll need to get some video footage up in just a few moments. Okay. But what's interesting in this is it's come out of course, the debate. Now, the first attempt happened out of the debate. It's almost like we're seeing a pattern here.
Now, I just didn't even put that little equation together until you actually said it earlier. And you're so right. I mean, the timing is really, there's quite a pattern here.
So it's interesting what's coming out in relation to the policies that were put out in that debate. Trump basically said to Kamala, you might as well join MAGA because you're just taking all the ideas that we have and sprouting them as if they're your own.
Yep. Didn't he bring her a hat at the debate?
No, that was for Biden.
Biden was interacting with an individual, and he gave him his hat. He autographed one, and then he gave him the other hat, and he put it on as a bit of a joke. People are seeing through all of this and what's going on. What is really interesting about the campaigning, though, is economic policy that's coming through or ideas. We saw real interesting stuff going on. Trump's interest in Bitcoin 2024, the big conference, and his approach to America being number one as far as crypto is concerned. Going, listen, we've got to do this. Particularly if the BRICS nations are ganging up on the US dollar, you can see why he wants to make that pivot for his nation. There's a really interesting snippet here that I want to play now, if we may, on his policies as far as economics are concerned. This is a crowd winner, and it's going to be interesting to break this down, the idea.
Now, before you press the button, I just want to say this. Okay,
can we press your buttons all the time, Aaron?
You certainly do. Now, again, not taking that any further. I'm going to go with this, though. Okay, shall we just right now start a bit of a bet? Put some money on the table. How long will it be before Kamala announces this as a policy?
I'm also announcing that as part of our additional tax cuts, we will end all taxes on overtime. You know what that means? Think of that.
I got to pause it here. So as someone who had a job where my standard roster was 72 hours a week, it was awesome. Highest paid security guard in WA at the time.
And the worst one.
No, come on, airside out the Perth airport, sitting there watching other people work. It was brilliant.
The Australian dream right there.
You know, it was directly after my divorce.
That would have been so boring, though.
Oh,
72 hours of watching other people.
I know.
12-hour shifts every day, 6 days a week. Like, it was brutal. But I paid for my divorce in 6 months.
Oh, geez, it took me 6 years. So well done.
So yeah, I was stoked. I was absolutely stoked. Anyway, like that would have taken me. So this is like 8 years ago now, maybe 9 years ago. I would have. Yeah, I could have retired in about 6 years doing that.
Amazing. Now, look, we do, and we're going to get straight back to the video, but let's face it, overtime is a great reward for working hard. And this is such a good policy.
Right. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, that's just a great policy. So, into it.
Think of that.
You could have won.
Think of that. That gives people more of an incentive to work.
That's right.
It gives the companies it's a lot easier to get the people. And, you know, I went to some economists, great ones, and I said, what do you think? They said, it would be unbelievable. You'll get a whole new workforce by doing that. No taxes on overtime.
Hey.
So I just want to throw, he's saying some great economists. So I know Shaq's not an economist, but he's the closest we got to one. So Shaq, let's I want to leave Trump up there. Look how serious that face is. But while we've got Trump looking all serious with his full ear there, what's your thoughts on no tax on overtime?
Well, I mean, it sounds good in theory. I'm a little bit unsure how that would work because, you know, what if the whole workforce just decides, well, you know what, I only want to work part time because then everything that I do over that is going to be overtime. What about those people that have 2 different jobs, stuff like that? So I'd be a little bit concerned about practically how that would work. But the sentiment, the idea, I think is a good one. And it certainly is a steep contrast to what Kamala Harris is talking about, where although hers is for the very wealthy, but she's talking about having a 25% tax on unrealized capital gains. Now, okay, in fairness, she's only talking about people that have a net worth of more than 100 million. But that means that if you've started up a company and the company has grown and its book value is really high, you're going to have to sell your company to pay the taxes, which means international investors will end up owning all of the US startups. That doesn't make any sense. Right. I would say that when you hear ideas floated, this is something that they're thinking about doing. They may not think it's going to work now, but it's a seed that they're planting now. For example, they talk about inheritance taxes here in Australia. So I think that there's a very sharp contrast between high tax left parties and low tax right parties. And personally, I think that the way to go is for a lower taxation of people and a broader based tax base.
So when I left high school, I actually had 2 jobs. So I worked as a roof tiler, like during the business hours. Then at nighttime, I worked as a glassy at a nightclub, and that's how I paid for everything.
Right.
If my overtime wasn't taxed, I wouldn't need that second job.
Interesting.
So
what I'm suggesting is that if you've got 2 jobs, well, the way that I would envisage that you would make this work is that if you work 37.5 hours, right, then any extra hours that you work shouldn't be taxed regardless of who you work for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's
because that's the equivalent of overtime.
Yeah. I think there's lots of ways you can massage this to actually make it work. But for me, from a worker's perspective, it just means I wouldn't have to do that. You know, having those, say, 4 hours extra at home every week would drastically reduce burnout. It would make me want to stay at work knowing, hey, I'm getting my full, you know, $40, $50 an hour, whatever it is for overtime. So it takes all the incentive to actually have that second job away.
Not only that, but encourages Americans to work harder, to rebuild their economy after the shocks that it's had. In terms
ethically, for looking on the outside, looking in, it looks like that the ethics of the country have changed, right? And that hardworking sort of, and I'll achieve more and go up the scale. That seemed to be so much part of America. Just doesn't feel like it is anymore.
Look at Trump's first term. It was to basically bring jobs back onshore, right? And to make America more self-sufficient and not be so reliant on overseas produced companies. Look at the tariff war it had with China. So this says to me, okay, I really want to double down in manufacturing for our country and being able to be productive. This is now giving the everyday person an incentive to work towards it as well.
So in saying that, let's say it does come in, let's say Trump does organize it, let's say people are earning money like that. One thing I would request is that the financial institutions do not take that into account for affordability for mortgages, personal loans, credit cards, things like that, because I can see the GFC happening all over again. People will be taking this overtime into account because it's tax-free. It's disposable income for them. If they calculate the capacity base on that overtime, unless it's in their contract, they do it regularly and they've been doing it for a long time. Only at that point should it be taken into account for capacity.
This is why policy needs to be really, really, really well sorted before it's put through, and this is why it's great to have the levels of government.
I think you're going into a rather nuanced point there. The banks already discount overtime and stuff like that, and they average it. So there's a bit of a formula that they use. But I don't think that was the cause of the GFC. The GFC was caused, in my view, by the Fed and most importantly by the government, saying that everybody should own their own home, and basically changing the regulations that the banks would loan when the banks ordinarily wouldn't have made those loans. So I blame the government for it.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, Shaq. That was the cause of it. But I really hope that the banks are allowed to set their own lending capacities, not the government. Whenever the banks touch something, they stuff it up. So anyway, I think we get back into it.
Absolutely.
The people who work overtime are among the hardest working citizens in our country. And for too long, no one in Washington has been looking out for them. Those are the people that really work. They're police officers, nurses, factory workers, construction workers, truck drivers, and machine operators. It's time for the working man and woman to finally catch a break, and that's what we're doing, because this is a good one.
So just one other thing I want to say on that one. Like, you listen to all the people they're identifying there.
Yep.
So how many of them would be sending money offshore? Not many of them. Most of those people on their way home, they'll be stopping off at local grocery shop to do their food shopping. And if you chuck an extra $50 in someone's pocket, what are they going to do with it?
Spend it.
Spend it generally within the local community. So to me, like, there's so many positives with this. Like, obviously there's going to be risks on everything. The government's going to lose a heap of money because they're not how much tax is actually generated from overtime.
He's got that covered with the tariffs coming in from China. So
of course, we'll make
good.
We might.
That's the thing with these tips. If I've gone out and I've earned the money, and I'm at a restaurant, and I give you a $50 tip. I've already paid tax on that money, right? Yeah. So, like, you shouldn't have to pay tax on it again. It's a gift from me to you to recognise your good service. And I have to tell you, I never really used to tip in Australia because I figured, hey, like, our wages are higher. But I do tip now. I mean, I'm not going to tip everywhere, but when I go to a nice restaurant, sit down, I always give the staff a bit extra because I think it's the right thing to do. So I think there's that clear contrast. I mean, Kamala Harris is talking about increasing the corporate rate of tax back to 28%, which is basically our rates. Now, if the US wants to remain competitive, it needs to have a tax system which is competitive. Most of Europe is sitting around the 20% mark, sometimes less. Ireland, for example, 12.5%. And even places that you normally would consider to be high tax, like Sweden, its corporate tax rate is 21%. So lowering the tax has actually resulted in a boost in their economy. Now, Kamala Harris's grand idea is to increase the taxes to 28%. It used to be 40%. So she's like, oh, well, it's the halfway point. No, don't do that. You don't need that much money.
Shaq, why would she think this way? Why would Kamala Harris, whatever her name is this week, why would she care about what's happening in the other countries? I mean, look, she hasn't been to the border, but she hasn't even been to Europe, right? So why would she care about what's going on in Europe? Yeah, she's insular idiot ideas.
Well, everybody's point with Kamala is, if you can fix it, why don't you do it now?
You had 3.5 years. Go and do it.
Right? Well, you can wake Biden up at 4 p.m.
I'm really surprised. I watched the debate live with Joel Jamal. I was on his show for the debate,
by the way,
and like I thought he won. I thought it was a really good version of him. He was very, very restrained. I understand why people say that she won. I suppose she did, but I'm surprised because here she is. She's had a month, and she has. She hasn't done any interviews until the CNN interview, which was just a puff paste. She goes out on the debate stage and, pressed for, like, when she's asked questions about immigration, and her answer was that nobody shows up to Donald Trump's rallies, and when they do go to Donald Trump's rallies, they get bored and they leave out of exhaustion and things like that. That is not an answer to immigration. When it came to what is she going to do for the middle class, she made a statement along the lines of, I'm the only person on stage that comes from the middle class, and what I want to do is lift the middle class up. What does that mean? What the hell does that mean? That's a whole lot of words. It says absolutely nothing.
Well,
but also, Lift them up to what exactly? Because you hate the rich, you hate the wealthy, and you hate the upper middle class. In fact, you hate them so much you want to take all their money. So what's your plan? You're going to lift them up by what? Having them work, unleashing all of their good ideas, and then when they make something, you're just going to take it all? Is that the plan? Opt me out, thank you very much. I'll move somewhere else.
And I don't think that is the key point. I don't think she understands that a lot of the people who are in that upper echelons on the money that they can actually earn, like the major corporation owners, they actually have the facilities and the capital to be able to go, you know what, America's a no-go anymore. Bugger, I'm off to Sweden, I'm off to India, I'm off to China, I'm off to Australia, I'm off to wherever. They won't stick around because it doesn't make financial sense.
Well, one of my private bankers just sent me a product the last couple of days. And capital guaranteed investment returns, well, there's no guarantee on the returns, but the returns could be anywhere, I'm expecting it to be at least 15% per annum. Now, I had a look at this product for the last 3 years. Its average return was 27%. Capital guaranteed by the bank. Not a bad investment. Well, guess what? That same bank operates in the United States. You can't get it there.
Really?
And even for me, actually here, I wouldn't be able to get it here, I don't think. It's only because this is one of my overseas private banks. Although here, because you qualify for being a wholesale investor and that sort of stuff. But this is the thing, like wealthy people, and the wealthier you get, you start to look for advisors, tax advisors, accountants, bankers come to you, all that sort of stuff. And it opens up opportunities. But those are the opportunities that are denied to the everyday person because the retail banks here don't care about you. And why would they? Because between them, they've got a monopoly. So they're not interested in helping you to get ahead. So I would say, again, like I said on the other show, you should look overseas. You should look around the world. You can't change the world, but you can change your own world. And that's exactly what people should be doing. Because the bottom line is that all these governments want to do is just take more and more money so they can take your money and give it to their friends.
Pretty much. Bang on.
So,
Travis, let's talk about some of the comments that are coming up.
Lol, Shaq, these folks talking about unrealized value have zero IQ and no knowledge of economics.
A lot of people
so that's in
agree with
regards to taxing unrealized profits or unrealized gains.
I just can't get over that.
I see another comment from him on YouTube that says Kamala supporters won't ask those questions as their support for her is emotionally based. I think that is absolutely true. I've got friends in the United States, across many states. I've got friends and family there. And I've got MAGA supporter friends. I've got just general Republican friends. I've got Democrat friends, and I've got some, some very, very progressive friends. And you're right. When you ask Republicans or you ask Donald Trump supporters why they're voting for Donald Trump, they'll give you reasons. When you ask people why they're going to vote for Kamala Harris, it's because, she's a black woman and it's so historic and this and that. It's like, what the hell does that mean? I mean, I've never had an investor say to me, back when I was, managing client money, I've never had an investor say to me, you're the first person who's Fijian Indian born in Perth that we've ever given money for. We're really excited. Nobody gives a shit. Right?
Exactly.
What they want to know is, do I like you and do I trust that you're going to be able to actually give me a return on my investment? That's what people care about.
That's true. Now, Derek, we've got a lot of things to talk about today.
We still have more of the video.
Oh, we do we?
Yeah.
All right, let's finish that off real quick.
And I think it's going to be great for the country. So that's why we will be saying that if you're an overtime worker when you're past 40 hours a week, think of that.
40 hours.
Your overtime hours will be tax-free. Okay, good. You're going to have it too.
Wonderful.
So there you go. I'm glad I did finish that one just for Shaq. So 40 hours a week is the cutoff mark.
That's the magic number.
So I would have got 32 hours a week tax-free.
Woohoo.
You know how much money you can earn in that sort of like time period?
Yeah, a lot.
Stop living in the past, mate. Let's move.
But this isn't a joke either. That's roughly 1,000 extra
Mate,
in my pocket.
Shoulda, coulda, woulda.
And if the dog hadn't stopped to do a shit, it would have caught the rabbit. Pop's favorite saying.
Thanks for always taking it down there.
Yeah.
Let's go, mate.
It's interesting the contrast.
I actually haven't seen that, so I'm glad that he said it because I've heard of it, but I didn't realize he'd actually gone on to say that. And what you're trying to say, Travis, is you could have paid off your divorce in 3 months instead of 6 if you had have waited until now to get divorced and you moved to the United States.
Yeah, exactly. But if I had done it now, I know how to set myself up better, and I wouldn't have had to pay off the divorce in the first place. About knowing the system you're in.
I know the system I'm in. That's why I'll never remarry. But anyway.
So what you're going to do, gentlemen, have prenuptial agreements. Not that it matters too much. Just have prenuptial agreements and make sure that your assets are all overseas and in foreign trusts and all set up so that they can't get to it.
Imagine that.
So apparently,
Imagine
Michael
that.
got remarried, and
It's time for us to fight back
he's-
against the unfair systems that we have. And one way to fight back is to make sure that our money that we've worked for, or however we've got, it doesn't really matter, that our money is not something they can get their bloody grubby hands on.
So true.